What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shayne Kubis. Shayne, how you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. Had a week off from the pod, so we could do Senior Bowl stuff. We'll be talking about that, but definitely ready to kind of get into the off season even more so now that we're getting some of the All-Star games out of the way and everything else. So
Yeah, relatively inadvertent week off just because I got more bogged down doing Senior Bowl stuff as I
yeah,
was there than I
hmm
thought I would. But, there isn't a ton to talk about, and anything that did happen, we're just going to get caught up with today. We're still probably going to stick with our once a week
hmm
episode schedule moving forward, just because we want to kind of space things out so we're not
yeah.
light on content for this part
don't have
growing
to
of the
make
season.
don't have to make crap up. Just want to make sure we
Exactly,
have enough
exactly.
to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, but so the big news is that Lawson was hired as the defensive coordinator after the Steelers interviewed several other people. I think some other teams interviewed Austin.
hmm
So he's going to be the DC. And I've seen a lot of people saying, like, oh, this is frustrating because it's just another internal hire. They're not looking outside for candidates. And I mean, first of all, they did look outside. And the plan has been for Austin to be the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that was the plan, I think. And I think doing just their due diligence obviously is part of that process, but I think what this comes down to from a fan's perspective is knowing what we know with Tomlin handling a lot of the play calling duties for
Mm-hmm.
the defense, how much was it going to matter?
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, Austin knows this team already. Like I say, he's been here for a couple of years now. He's been a defensive coordinator in the past, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
has that background. I think that it's fine because of the fact that if we brought someone else in, they were probably going to have to cede at least some responsibility to Tomlin, and they
Mm-hmm.
either wouldn't have wanted to do that or it wouldn't have been a benefit to us or them for that to be the case. So, based on what we kind of know about the setup, I think that this makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the internal hire thing, like he's only been with the Steelers since 2019.
Yeah, he's not this guy that's been groomed through the
Yeah,
system over years. He's an older coach, but
yeah,
not with us. He's just been around for a long time.
yeah. Like he's never. I mean, I'm kind of looking at his career right now, and I don't even see like any like overlap with Tomlin that I'm aware
I
of.
don't think so. Off the top of
And
my
I mean,
head.
he's from Pittsburgh originally, so like if you want to argue that, that's
But
he went to Pittsburgh too, like the
right.
college. So
Yeah.
that if you want to pull that, I guess okay. But I mean, he was a defensive coordinator for the Lions and the Bengals for a few years. So, I think he's been brought up in other systems. So I think,
Yeah.
and from what we've seen, like the team really likes and respects him. And
Yes.
if you're not going to be the play caller, then that's what I want from the defensive coordinator. I want the
Exactly.
guy
Yeah.
who, is kind of this more like the schematic game planner, during the week. And then, Tomlin will still call the plays and, Austin can make suggestions and adjustments and all that. So I'm very much okay with this hire.
Yeah. Me too.
I did like the idea of bringing Patrick Graham in.
Yeah, that would have
He's
been great, but
yeah,
I
but
mean,
I mean, this has been the plan. Just I think they kind of knew that Butler's time was limited, so they're like, all right, we're gonna bring this guy in, and we're gonna kind of get him
groom him to
familiar with
replace
these
him.
people,
Yeah.
and then he will eventually be ready to go. So that's the one big one. The other interesting one is that Chris Morgan, who was promoted to be offensive line coach for the Steelers, was hired as the Bears offensive line coach.
Yeah.
So Steelers are currently out of an offensive line coach, and seemingly the planets are aligning because Mike Munchak is seemingly out in Denver.
Yeah. Which all I'm gonna say is I don't know how much I'd be willing to pay him ultimately, but I'd be willing to make him the highest paid offensive line coach by a good amount.
Yep,
To bring
I
him
agree.
back in. It just makes too much sense. We're in a transitionary period with the offensive line. Munchak needs a new job. He's obviously very familiar with us for reasons. It was one of those things where it makes too much sense, so much so that I feel like it won't happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it doesn't happen, I'm gonna just kind of sit here and think other than Munchak just straight up saying he doesn't want to do it, or he decides he's done or something.
Yeah.
Anything other than that, it's kind of a mistake, I think, if you don't bring him in.
Right. And the reason he left was to be closer to, I believe, his daughter. She was in Colorado. So I just think the Steelers, Steelers, just buy out her house, give her Stephon Tuitt's house.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then, that all works out. Because, I mean, if anybody's going to fix this offensive line, it's Mike Munchak. I mean, I think you could argue he took over a more dire situation in the 2010s and turned it into a top 5, maybe a top 3 offensive line in the league.
Oh, for sure. Especially when we are at our best with everybody in their prime.
And with you have your first rounders in Pouncey and DeCastro, but then you have I guess Marcus Gilbert was a second round pick.
Yeah, but he was
Beecham,
kind of the guy that was hurt.
Kelvin Beecham, late round pick. Ramon Foster undrafted, then turning Alejandro Villanueva, who was a converted triple option wide receiver, into a Pro Bowl left tackle.
Insane.
So just crazy stuff, even, kind of setting up the development of a guy like Tariq Woolen for.
Right.
So yeah, I would be thrilled if they could bring him back. Again, it's seeming one of those things where it's too good to be true, and that's how a lot of things with the Steelers work out. Is you just have these great ideas and they just don't follow them for some reason.
Yeah, it feels like it, but at the same time, some breaking news I want to throw out there just because I saw it come across. Miami just hired McDaniel.
Oh yes, right. So
that's cool.
Good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw that. Had to throw that in there. That's kind of what I thought was going to happen. But as far as like with the Munchak thing, if we can get him back, especially with all the pieces we have available already, and then on top of who we can get in the draft and also for agency possibly, it just makes, like I said, we could very quickly escalate the offensive line back to at least good enough where they're benefit to the team and not just skating by.
That's a problem. And that's the thing is, like, ostensibly this team is going to be spending a lot of financial and draft capital on young offensive linemen, and that's when you want Mike Munchak to get in there to teach them the proper habits to, kind of accelerate their growth and learning curve as soon as they get in the building. And he is getting up there, so at least kind of give him, you kind of like those Patriots did with Skarnecki when they brought him back. Kind of, we just need you to kind of kickstart things. Stay for a few years and then, you can retire.
He doesn't have to sit there for a decade again or anything like that. If we can get him in the building while we have the guys we have that are young and need that development, they can take care of things from there once they get things rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned it earlier, but I don't have this on the rundown, but it's because I did honestly forget about it. But there is this kind of developing situation with Stephon Tuitt where the team is still unclear as to his future. And I think we've talked about this, but it's been a while. So just to refresh everybody's memory, his brother was killed, I believe, in a car crash over the summer. And the grieving process of that delayed Stephon Tuitt's rehab process from a knee injury, which essentially caused him to miss the entire season. The Tomlin and Rooney and I think Colbert have all been asked about it. They said, we're still a little in the dark here. But we're trying to give Stephon his space. We're going to, go with his schedule. At this point, there was the report that Stephon Tuitt's house was, I believe, on the market and under contract to be sold. And again, it doesn't mean anything, or it doesn't mean everything. But it's something and this is kind of just an odd situation to begin with.
Yeah, it's so hard to talk about it because we just don't know enough from his perspective, especially like, is it a situation where is he maybe thinking about being done with football entirely? Is it a situation where he feels like he needs to take time away even more and he does want to play again, but then the Steelers have to decide if he has a $14 million cap hit, and how do we handle that? Do we need a plan for him not to be here? So much of that is unknown that ideally, like, I hope that ultimately he is in a good place by the time that he would need to start showing up for things and he can get back into the team. But if we can't rely on that, then it does change how we approach the offseason a lot, because not having him there for a second year in a row would not be ideal, obviously, especially with Hayward still continuing to get older, even though he was fantastic, and Alu coming back again. But who knows if he's even going to be the same guy with everything. Like, there's so much uncertainty there that it's hard to really know what to do with it at this point.
Yeah, and the problem, I mean, at this point, if you kind of assume that Tuitt is on a regularly similar career arc to Cameron Hayward, like he is starting to enter those prime years. He's in his late 20s.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the contract on Spot Rack right now, and like you said, $14 million cap hit. After that, it goes down a lot. Only dead cap in 2023. That's when he's enters his 30s. But there seems to be some kind of, it was a restructure. There's some voided years and all that, which is very confusing. But the point is that, it would just be, it's going to be weird until we know like what his status is. And like I think we've talked about before, but the Steelers have had some bad luck with kind of out of the blue retirements. Think about Jason Worlds. That might be the only one, but that's the recent one I can think of.
It's a big one.
So hopefully Stephon is getting all the help he needs and everything, and ideally we'd love to have him back, but if that's not in his he doesn't want that in his future, that's perfectly acceptable. So the other thing would be that the Steelers interviewed some outside candidates for the GM job to replace Kevin Colbert. And I think that, like they did with the head coach, I think they're just kind of doing some due diligence with guys. But Ed Dodd's showing up on this list is pretty
Yes.
surprising because he is the assistant GM of the Colts and has been rumored for getting a full
Multiple,
GM job for many years. I think he was with the Seahawks before the Colts, and he was still getting buzz there. And then he signed on to be the assistant GM of the Colts below Chris Ballard. So it's been a long time coming for Dodd. So, you know, I would be excited getting Brandon Hunt in. And even if they went with Omar Khan, who's been an awesome cap guy, but I mean, swinging Dobbs would be a huge coup for a team that's already pretty well structured in the front office.
Right, and that's the thing about it, that because whenever you mentioned it to me about it, because I didn't see it as fast as you did, like the fact that he's been in the conversation for how many years and he just continues to withdraw because it's not what he wants, right? Like he clearly is looking for a very specific situation. Maybe it's certain promises about control over things, maybe it's certain expectations or whatever the case may be. But if you can get a guy that has clearly been in very high demand for years and just hasn't made a decision on where he wants to take on that full role at, that would be huge for the franchise, just because, especially getting a guy outside of the franchise, that would make people kind of relax on the whole hiring within thing, even though I think that mostly is a fine thing to do, especially if the guys you have are quality. And I have no problem with if they go with a combination of or one of the guys we already have with Khan or Hunt, but Dodds clearly would be a huge get for any team that would be able to get him.
Yeah, and it seems like he's interviewing with the Raiders, but I think they hired a guy from the Patriots to be there.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
the Bears did this. The Bears have picked another guy, so yeah, I'm not exactly sure, kind of, because I mean, like you said, he's interviewed with a bunch of jobs, and they've all had kind of varying situations, so I'm not exactly sure what he's looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like control related things, which I feel like, I mean, some of the franchises that have been in the market, I feel like would have just said, yeah, you can do what you want, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
If that was part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a lot of them probably have been like kind of fresh starts. So maybe he is looking for something more established where, you know, he'll be stepping into a
better
pretty clear role with Mike Tomlin as the head coach. I mean, ostensibly Mike Tomlin will have some decision making power there. But again, if he wanted full control, he had plenty of opportunities to do so.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so the other two candidates were Ryan Cowden, who's the vice president of player personnel for the Tennessee Titans, and JoJo Wooden, who's the director of player personnel with the Los Angeles Chargers. Both teams have done a really good job of drafting in recent years, so those are good names. But that's about all I know about them, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think that they're probably serious contenders for anything. I think it's more so just, like I said, guys that are in the market right now for it and just kind of doing their diligence on it. So
yeah, for sure. So with that, we'll move into news that I think it happened the day our last episode came out.
Yeah, so some stuff that we definitely need to talk about.
Again, really great timing. But Ben Roethlisberger officially, at least he announced his retirement. You know, I think based on the contract. Right. Well, so I say that because I think he has the case where the contract deadlines are, if he files it post 6/1, then it saves the Steelers a lot of money. I mean, it's retirement. It doesn't matter as much. But so I think, you know, that's a thing. But anyway, so he posted a very long video thanking everybody that's been involved with the team, reading off a very long note card and very obviously reading right off it, which was kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
But, you know, and again, we all expected it to be coming. A lot of people with the good riddance energy for it, which I can understand.
Yeah, I understand.
Especially after the slobbering that went on over the last month or so, which did get to be a bit much at sometimes.
It's funny, like, because even from our perspective, right? Like, even I was kind of like, all right, you know, we get, but like from other fans' perspective, like seeing this in the past with other players and stuff like that, similar things, not, you know, but like I was always like, all right, yeah, we understand, and seeing it from that perspective of it being Ben was kind of like, oh, I can understand why. Yeah, like it can be a little bit just nauseating, I feel, for a lot of people. But, you know, if for a guy that played as long as he did and did what he did, I'm not surprised that's how it played out.
Yeah, and I mean, so Ben finishes about top 5 in most passing categories. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll stay there for long with guys like Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, pretty hot in his stint, obviously the younger guys. But
yeah, they're
a lot of guys hot in his tail. I'm not sure anybody will ever surpass his sack record for most career sacks, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's one thing he probably. So the problem with it, right, is like it's ironic because passing has become more and more common, but just the rate at which that man just got sacked, especially early on in his career, was just so ridiculous.
Like 2007 to 2008, I guess more like 2008 to 2013 era. That like 5 or 6 year stretch was just
like 50
brutal.
sacks a season.
Yeah,
insane. I'm like, what are we like? I obviously like watching, like, you know why it happened, but like it's comical now because like guys are going to throw more than ever, and they're not going to get unless somehow Burrow plays for like 20 years. The Bengals
and they just never improve the offensive line.
Get a good offensive line. He might have a shot, but even then, like he'll just eventually just start throwing the ball out like 2 seconds, like Ben started to do it.
Yep, so,
exactly. I think he probably got that one in the bag for a while at least.
Yeah, and then at that point, I think a lot of Steelers fans were kind of excited because it's like, all right, well, this will be really cool. We'll have Ben's Hall of Fame ceremony in 5 years, and he'll be the guy there. And then next week, Schefter reports it. Jeff Darlington reports it accurately, early, but accurately. A lot of people got on Schefter for reporting this early.
This was just an early thing and not a wrong thing.
Yeah,
so
which
I'll give him that credit.
Some people should kind of pull back what they were saying because it's like he was right. And he was right mostly because Darlington's super plugged in with all that.
Oh yeah.
But regardless, Tom Brady retired.
Yes, Tom decided that he was done despite not showing a whole lot of reason to not play other than just because he doesn't want to anymore.
No, his last pass in his career was a 50-yard bomb to Mike Evans over Jalen Ramsey, which Mike Evans then promptly threw into the stands.
Which it was real smart. Yeah, because I mean, granted, he didn't know, but still,
right? It's
it's funny now, but I expected him to come back at least next year. After the season, just because again, he's very likely going to be at worst the number 2 MVP candidate.
I mean, he had the most yards of his career this year. Yeah, I think he led the NFL. Yeah,
and it's like again, he's never been a guy that's relied on his physical tools, right? So it was going to take a long time for that to become a problem, and even now, it still hasn't. Like you could argue, like looking back, like he probably has a stronger arm now than he did at certain points of his career, especially early on. Like it's just, and again, it's weird to say that, but this is kind of what he's done. And him quitting is more so about, I think that he just realized that the odds of him getting back to a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, with the roster the way that it is right now, especially with the money issues that they're going to ultimately have, and keeping guys like Godwin around is just not likely. Like he probably felt like his best opportunity to win a Super Bowl was to move on again, which wouldn't have been a great thing to do for him and his legacy, I don't think. And he felt like he hasn't had anything to prove really for more than a decade.
Yeah.
Like more than a decade.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think he just ultimately decided I'd rather just take the time with my family that I'll get now and just kind of go out while still technically on top, essentially.
Listen, he saw blood and he got spooked. Let's be honest.
That would be hilarious. If he's like, "Man, I bled. I'm good.
This looks like 40s. A tomato or a strawberry. I can't be around it."
No. I have so many jokes about like, is he finally going to eat food? Like
that strawberry be hitting different.
Listen, I want to see him gain like 50 pounds. Like the next time I see him like on an immediate thing, I want to see him like 275 and like looking like he's really loving his life.
looking like Ben looks now is what you're saying.
Right. Basically, I want to see him do the reverse offensive lineman thing.
Yeah.
Where he puts on 50 pounds instead of, like that would be helpful.
Yeah. And when Ben retired, Brady posted that tweet where it was like, Ben never lived by the TB12 method, but somehow still got it done. I was like, all right, man, cool.
We get it. We get it. He's fat. All right, let's move on.
Yeah. So again, good riddance, Tom Brady.
Right.
He's the greatest quarterback of all time. He's the greatest football player of all time.
Yeah,
we don't really need to say anymore. But so that happened, and Ben's not going to have his. And probably Gronk's going to retire too now, so that's really going to take over.
It's just going to be a mess, right? Like that was the biggest thing. I actually wrote something about it and talking more about like I didn't lean into the idea of like, oh, it sucks that we have to share the stage with them, but more so like they're clearly going to put them both in. It's not like that's a concern of mine. But like I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, and people immediately jumped on it like they're going to both get in. What are you talking? I'm like, yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, but I think that because of how close it is, and this will be Steelers fans, last time to at least try to beat Tom Brady at something. So, it might be like, all right, listen, everybody has to go. I'm considering going because of it. Although tickets are really expensive.
Yeah, I really want to do it, but like we'll have to see what's going on in 2027. So
yeah. So the other transaction kind of news was that Juju Smith-Schuster posted, I think it was on Instagram, a story of basically saying goodbye Pittsburgh. It was just kind of more of a video. It wasn't like a full like thank you thing. I imagine that might come later once he officially hits free agency. But it seems like he's leaving, and he was doing some kind of event at the Cowboys stadium, some sponsorship thing, and said, he just likes the Cowboys facilities and likes how their lockers aren't made of wood.
That comment cracked me up because I'm like, it's just objectively funny thing.
Yeah, like, and I think that's the thing is, and like I don't know why people do this, but they take a lot of what Juju does and says, so personally.
Not only personally, but way too seriously.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This is a man who clearly does not take himself or much else seriously, and it's just because it's kind of how he is.
And I think just so many Steelers fans are just relatively older, and
that's true.
They have this really lionized view of the franchise where everything they've done is perfect. And granted, it has led to success, but I think that you just need to like kind of laugh at yourself sometimes, and like there are certain things about the Steelers franchise and their fans, honestly, that are like kind of funny because of how odd they are. And I think that him kind of poking fun at, and also it's just like it's almost kind of poking fun at the Cowboys too, where it's like they have these ungodly, ostentatious facilities, and they have just the same amount. They have less Super Bowls than the Steelers, so
I think it was harmless. I think that Juju was just kind of saying stuff just to be funny, and like ultimately, if he does leave, I don't know where he was going to go, obviously, but I'm gonna remember him fondly and not like
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people are going to kind of they're going to say they're happy that he's gone. I know that's going to be coming. And I think that's unfortunate because I'd honestly loved it, especially because of the season he had, and it's not going to inflate his value. Like I would love to bring him back just because I know what I'm getting out of him when he's healthy. But if they don't, I think he'll do well wherever he goes next time.
Yeah, I do kind of want him to go somewhere where he can really thrive and be part of a really dynamic offense. So going to the Cowboys, going to the Chiefs, I'd be like, all right, go fly free, my beautiful son.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's all the news we have from kind of the last week. But so now we'll pivot to the Senior Bowl stuff. So as I mentioned, I was there, and the big thing that was the talking point that connected with the Steelers was the Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert's apparent fascination with Malik Willis, the quarterback from Liberty University. And there was pictures of Tomlin talking to Malik Willis' parents. There was a lot of saying like Tomlin was just staring Willis down every time he took a snap. So as somebody who wasn't there and somebody also who watched the practices virtually, what did you make of all that?
I mean, for me, I think it makes a lot of sense because clearly he's that type of quarterback that I think they're wanting to go after as far as the skill set moving forward. Maybe not, he doesn't have to be as great of a runner as Willis is, but somebody who does have the ability to make plays out of structure, to keep plays alive, because we just haven't had that for a long time, right? And Ben hasn't played that way in a long time, and the NFL is definitely trending in that direction. And
I mean, this would be the parallels are like Dennis Dixon for those few games, and Cordell Stewart.
Right. Yeah. But like again, like with Willis, there's a lot of fascination with him across the league, I imagine, just because of his like the way that he's able to make plays with his legs and the arm strength that he displays. It gives people that idea, like, okay, if I can make this guy a more polished passer, if I can get him to do X, Y, Z, I'll have him like. And again, that's how sometimes you get promoted. Sometimes how you get fired in this league is by putting your mark on a guy like this and saying he's our guy. Like. It's a risk, and I'm not surprised that they're interested in him because of what they've been talking about that they want in the quarterback position. But I think it's being overblown by a lot. I think they're really interested in all of the quarterbacks that might be at the top of the draft.
I completely agree with that. And Joe Marino had a great tweet about Willis on the first day. He said Malik Willis had the 5 best throws of practice and the 5 worst.
And that's what's going to be with him.
Yes, exactly. And I talked to Joe actually for a little bit and asked him about this kind of situation, and he told me to get, as a Steelers fan, get very familiar with Matt Corral, which was very surprising to me because like you said, the Steelers have been connected with all the quarterbacks. They've obviously been connected with Kenny Pickett, who has been working out with the Steelers for many years now. He's not the runner that Willis is, but he does have the mobility that they've been talking about. There's Sam Howell, who Kevin Colbert has been to seemingly every single one of his games.
Yes, which is something that was talked about a lot during the season. Yeah, so
there's they've been tied to Carson Strong a little bit. Again, somebody not as mobile, but he looked pretty mobile in Mobile. I said that.
Nice
and I mean, like Desmond Ritter's there too. I don't love him, but he is quite mobile as well.
Yeah.
So again, and all those guys are older, and I feel like the Steelers have been tied to all of them at some point or another. Matt Corral's kind of the odd man out, but he does have that skill set. So
yeah, he does.
I think, and granted, a lot of people are like the Steelers do not hide their intentions well. You can think of a few years ago when they wanted William Jackson III and basically allowed Bengals to snipe him away. Think about this past year with Najee Harris. Luckily, nobody else wanted to take him.
Right.
And some people are, there's telegraphing their interest for Malik Willis. And I would push back on that one because I don't think Willis will be there at 20.
No,
and I don't think the Steelers are going to trade up to get him.
No.
I also think based on all the other information we have, I think the Steelers are trying to breadcrumb every quarterback so as to muddy the waters of information with who they're tied to. So any quarterback is on the table, and I think that they know that if they did want Willis, I think they're smart enough to know that he needs a redshirt year.
Yeah.
Because he is incredibly talented, but the talent is incredible because he can make 50-yard throws with ease with just his arm. There's no power from his lower body mechanics. It's purely his pectorals, his shoulder, and his arm. And if you can fix that and, put all that together, then he's going to be throwing 80-yard bombs when his mechanics are good. So, but I again, I'm not the biggest fan of this quarterback class. I really hope the Steelers should not invest in it and wait for next year. But so I have some Senior Bowl targets in our rundown here, but is there anybody else that you are interested in that was at the Senior Bowl that we have not had a chance to talk about?
Really just looking at the list we're going to go through, like nobody stands out that I'm not seeing. But in general, like all the guys we're about to talk about are either positions of need in general or just guys that I think would be a really good fit with what we're trying to do. I want to start with the first one, obviously, with Zion Johnson. This guy, I just like the problem with it realistically. If we want him, we're going to have to take him at 20, I think, at this point, the way that he played, right? Like, there's no way that we can't, unless we were to obviously, like, maybe trade back a little bit or something, but even then, we couldn't trade back very far. If
you have to trade back, like, 2 picks for somebody who wants a quarterback.
Exactly. That's what it would end up having to be. Like, realistically, you wait any longer than that, he's going to go the way that he played.
And the thing is, the next few picks, none of those teams are going to want a quarterback. So it's after the Steelers, it's Patriots, Raiders, Cardinals, Cowboys, Bills, Titans. So the next one would be the Buccaneers at 27. So
yeah,
but there's like 6 picks there, or 6 or 7 picks, so you don't need to worry about jumping anybody. So
no,
yeah. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, I went to BC. I was there to a lot of reason to cover Zion, and he was especially dominant playing center, which is something he had never played before.
Yeah,
looked awesome. He can legitimately play all 5 positions on the offensive line. He would be best at guard, in my opinion.
Right.
And I did talk to him. He said he grew up a Steelers fan, which was very exciting to learn. He said he was a big fan of Marquise Pouncey and those kind of guys. So very cool to hear that. Like I said, I think there is a possibility he's there at 20. I am a little interested about his size because the Steelers, especially for the guards, seem to want to draft some bigger guys, and that's where a guy like Kenyon Green is kind of a little more interesting to me because he fits that size profile they're looking for a little better.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Johnson that's going to determine his status is like how does he grade out versus all the other offensive line talent that's in this class, right? Because if there's so many guys who are first round caliber players that he could end up getting pushed well past 20, but I doubt it, especially the way he played this week and the positional flexibility. But there's so many guys that are competing for those, like especially like the pick 10 and on to be in that conversation where it's hard to say who's going to fall where. Like Green could very well be gone. Johnson could even be gone. Like it's the offensive linemen that are going to be available for the Steelers at 20, if that's where they want to go, could really vary depending on how the next 2 months go.
Yeah, I heard Kyle Krabs say that Zion could go anywhere between 12 and 30 and wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly. So. Like that's just kind of where it's, especially because of how many, just the amount of guys that are capable or like draftable in that range at offensive line in this class is just more than we've seen in a while to me.
Yeah.
And it's going to muddy the waters as far as like who is actually going to be taken where, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that in mind, let's say they don't go for offensive line with the earlier picks and they save it for a little later. So I've highlighted a few. These are mostly guards.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
Because the tackle class is not my favorite. Where
other than at the top, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the 2 Georgia guys were ones intrigued me because of those size profiles. Yep. Jamari Sawyer and Justin Shaffer. Sawyer's funny because he was listed at 6'4" and came in at 6'2". So he's going to be moving to guard. And
he's a guard.
Yeah, they're both very guards, and they were reps where they were both on the field at the 2 guard positions. They both were very good run blockers, and they're both pretty solid in pass protection. So based on Steelers like those big school, big dude pedigree for the offensive line. So if they picked either of those in probably the third, I guess maybe the second or third round, I would not be shocked at all.
Right.
And then the other one is Luke Fortner, who's the center out of Kentucky. Again, a little bit bigger of a guy. We've talked extensively, obviously, about the Kendrick Green issue.
Yeah.
I did talk to Nick Faribault of Pro Football Network, who's obviously a big Steelers writer, and we've kind of talked about this for a while, and he was saying that he really thinks they are going to try to keep Green at center and just improve his technique there, because they think that they can fix it, and they are worried that it could, if you start him over at guard, which again he's played there before, so I'm not sure, but if you start him over there, then it is really starting from square one, and it might kind of just not be worth it.
Yeah, and like I understand that, I guess, to a certain extent. The problem with it is he has more experience at guard.
Yes,
and that's the thing, is like ideally you would imagine that he would have been more comfortable playing guard and then maybe working at trying to transition to center than the opposite, right? That would have been, obviously we didn't really have that luxury early on in the season, but like that would have been the better development path. But if you want to keep him at center, then you at least have to have a better backup plan for if that doesn't happen. If it doesn't work out.
And so that's why I mentioned in Fortner.
Right.
He's been an older player, but he's very experienced. That Kentucky offensive line has been putting guys in the NFL for a while now.
Yeah.
It had a really good program there, and he's the latest one. He's played both guard positions too, I think. Really smart guy. He's really involved in the community, so I think the Steelers would like that. They just know he's a really good guy. And he's one of the bigger centers in this class, because a lot of the centers in this class
they're on the lighter side.
The top two guys, they're smaller, more zone types, whereas Fortner's bigger. He's a pretty good athlete too, and he's he moves people with strength. So I think he could be an interesting, probably like an early day 3 guy for them. Big other position of need is corner, and I think there's a lot of guys that Steelers could like here. The first one would be Roger McCreary, and I picked him out because he kind of reminds me of Joe Hayden. A little bit of he's just not as athletic, or not as big, because a lot of people were worried about McCreary's arms because they're only 29 inches, but he's been able to survive as a really good press cornerback in the SEC. So
yeah, I'm not really concerned about it that much, because he clearly has been able to win with his technique.
With that being said, I'm concerned about his dietary habits.
Yeah, I saw you tweet about
this. Because apparently before every game, this man eats a full can of baked beans with 8 packets of sugar. And I just don't know if that's draftable. In fact,
here's the problem. The question I have, other than just why.
Sure.
Because like that's the first one.
Yep. I think I know where you're going. Let's continue.
But like, how could you possibly be in any sort of football shape by having 8 packets of sugar and already baked beans, which are already going to have some amount of sugar in them, before every game that you play? How did that start?
I'm curious how he got to 8.
Yeah, because there was some testing done for this.
Yeah, you have to. Like, you don't just pick 8 out of a hat. You have to do 5 and think, a little more.
Not
maybe
enough, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you go to 9, you're like, just a little too much. And I have questions, but I also kind of don't want them answered, because I don't.
Right, because like, how does this start? Like, what prompted this to begin?
Yeah,
like this is something he did as a kid, like where that's like maybe that's just what he had to eat sometimes or whatever, and like
if they take him and then go get Will Levis, Mr. Mayonnaise in his coffee, and eats the banana peel himself, I might have to quit this team.
Yeah, it's tough if they were like that's just too many bad things that people are doing with their body at the same time.
The other guys that I liked were Alontae Taylor from Tennessee, who is extremely physical, one of the most aggressive tackling corners I've seen in a long time, and they got him playing a little bit of safety and a little bit in slot too, so he's got that kind of Cam Sutton versatility.
Yeah, I think that'd be nice to have for sure.
Kobe Bryant, the reigning Jim Thorpe Award winner, is the best defensive back in the country, even though he's the lesser prospect on his own team.
Yeah, that's always a funny thing, right? In college, where it's like clearly, like obviously there's reasons for that, but like it is funny that
Bryant was probably the best corner there at the Senior Bowl, in my opinion. Just in terms of just not allowing separation. He's been starting for a long time for Cincinnati, so I just trust him.
There.
On the other hand, you have Tariq Woolen, who's a size, speed, athleticism freak. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a converted wide receiver, and he was regularly on the top list of the highest miles per hour on the tracking technology they use. And I mean, the Steelers don't usually kind of go for guys like this, but if you're going to get rid of Justin Lane sensibly, and you kind of want another guy that is that long kind of freak, especially even just on teams, like this is the guy that can do that.
Yeah, like he's one of those guys that like his size profile and his athleticism is enough where like if he doesn't work out as a corner full time, like he's definitely going to be a nice piece to have us in general, especially if he can play special teams well. Like, just so he'll find a way to make an impact, hopefully with that skill set.
Yeah, and then so that's all the corners. We'll move on to defense. I've got a few defensive linemen here. So the one is, we talked about him earlier, but Travis Jones, the nose tackle from Connecticut, who arguably had the best week of mobile in anybody, because at 6'4", 326. He was, and I mean, he gave Zion Johnson his fair share of problems, and Johnson was one of the best players there too. But Jones was just moving people with ease with his power, and he's got some developed pass rush moves too for a bigger guy.
Honestly,
So I mean, I think that he is probably a second round pick now, so that's a lot to invest in nose tackle. But he does have that pass rush ability where you can, I think, keep him on the field in all 3 downs if you want, and he's going to be a great run stuffer, obviously, as well.
Yeah, I really think that, especially because of the fact that from the Steelers' perspective, you're going to lose, whether it's this offseason. That doesn't sound like, I think he wants to come back to play with us, but Alu,
this season he's coming back, but this season he's back next year might be the problem. Yeah,
right. So like that's the thing, is like you're not sure his future holds. Probably going to be, at least if he doesn't show that he's not really that guy anymore this year.
I mean, he's going to be 36 soon,
right?
So
just investing in that position, even though again, second round pick's pretty high for a team that isn't necessarily like in contention, obviously, but because normally you want to save those picks. Like if you're going to take a guy like that high, it's because he's one of the missing pieces, obviously. But him in the middle of the defense,
like
and it's just
and in a division where you are going to be playing Baltimore, and Cleveland, and Cincinnati still does like to run the ball.
They do.
This is a team that will use a player like that, and I mean, this is a better Javon Hargrave as a prospect,
right? So, that's what I was going to say. Like that comparison of like, because again, I think he has enough,
and he is, like, the thing about Hargrave is he was kind of billed as just a bigger, but he was still like a penetrator, like a one.
Yeah, he was. Guy. Yeah, he wasn't a true like.
Whereas Jones is really that true massive 2-gapping nose tackle that can also give you some pass rush ability. So, I mean, I would be thrilled if they got Jones in the second round. The other guy I had down is Neil Farrell, and he's again a little more of their traditional type. You know, he's from LSU. He's been a player for a long time. He's played almost every position on the defensive line, like between the tackles. You know, he's played nose, he's played 2-tech, he's played 5-tech or 4-tech. He's done all of it. And I think Steelers will like that versatility because they like to move those guys around, guys like Chris Wormley. And also, I think this will be interesting because I think it was him that I said I would bet on to win the bench press, because he only has 31-inch arms, which as a big dude who's like 6'3", 312 or something like that. And if you have really short arms, you're going to rep out some benches. And I'm excited
you got
to see that.
Yeah, that would be fun to see. I'm just looking forward to the combine in general after Senior Bowl week. But
so we'll get into wide receivers, and I just have 2 highlighted again because, you know, with Juju ostensibly on his way out, there's a little bit of trade buzz about Chase Claypool. I don't know how legit that is, but regardless, they need to find at least a third wide receiver that is not Ray McLeod, who is wide receiver 1, obviously.
Right. No offense to Ray, but
but so the 2 guys that I thought were absolute standouts that I think would give the Steelers something they don't really have is Christian Watson from North Dakota State and Romeo Doubs from Nevada.
Yeah, both guys, just like, especially Watson, just blew up the Senior Bowl. Like he was clearly, especially compared to some of the other receivers, because not many of them did a lot to separate themselves. I liked what I saw out of Calvin Austin III too, is kind of that like shifty slot player with a lot of speed. As well. Like he was that easy speed, you could tell.
And that's a Ray type. That's the
exactly
thing.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is like, but other than a guy like that, like no one else really stood out as much as those 2, especially with Watson.
I would say some of the guys who did would kind of profile as more of a Deontay type. So if you're trying to build out that basketball team and you want a guy, I mean, the thing about Christian Watson is he can do literally anything because he's built. I mean, I think it was Ben Fennell of NFL Network and CBS who compared him to Martavis Bryant.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's really accurate because he is he is tall. He's 6'4", 210, but he is athletic as all hell. I mean, he was a FCS All-American as a kick returner at 6'4", 210, which is just, and they get them the ball on screens. They handed the ball off to him in the backfield. He's a good blocker, good route runner, great after the catch. I mean, people were kind of getting on McShay for having him as his 31st ranked wide receiver, which I just don't think he's watched enough film yet, which it's a North Dakota State wide receiver. Like, I'm not going to get too mad about him.
I'm not going to sit here and like, especially a guy that like clearly has a track record of
and it's not like North Dakota State throws their guys the ball a lot. Like,
no, they don't, and they don't have to. Like, they just don't have to. So like, Watson could have been, more he could have been more well known just because of his like skill set. But again, there's not a lot of reason to dig into that tape. But he's a guy that if you want to take a chance on any of the guys that aren't like the absolute top tier guys in this class, he'd be the first one off the board for me. Like,
and then you're a big Romeo Dubs guy out of Nevada.
Yes, right? I just love watching him and Carson Strong work over the past years, especially. I watched a lot of him, and like his ability, like because we talked about it, pre-show, like his release at his size and like the fact that that's how he wins primarily is very just interesting skill set to me.
Yeah,
like it. Because there was some plays like he had some drop issues early on, and like that again with the Senior Bowl.
There was a lot of guys had that issue. I think that you're getting used to new quarterbacks.
Right, it's hard.
In a while.
It's hard.
So I didn't on the first day, and then the second day was a torrential downpour. So tough there.
And then skill positions had a lot of concern, especially the first 2 days. It's just not a good look.
Dubs. I think Dubs does give them something a little different because he's not exactly your vertical X receiver who just goes down the field and beats people over the top and wins the catch point. I mean, he can do that. Maybe not what he's best at, but I think he's interesting in running a pretty complex intermediate route tree and winning contested catches over the middle of the field, and that's something the Steelers have not had. And that might allow then you still have Deontay doing his thing, and then you can still see if you can work Chase Claypool out as that vertical, get past the defense guy, or as more of the big slot guy who you kind of hit with play action shots. Right. So I like Dubs a lot from this group as well. We'll get into some linebackers now. I mentioned him earlier, Troy Anderson out of Montana State, who has a wild story. I mean, he came there and he was a running back. Then they moved him to quarterback in essentially like a wildcat scheme. And then he moved back to linebacker full time. And he was an FCS All-American at all three. And just won FCS Defensive Player of the Year this year. And for guys like that, especially like a guy who like didn't have a lot of recruiting buzz, went to Montana because he's local, Montana State because he's local. You were like, all right, is he an NFL athlete? And at 6'3", 242, he absolutely is. Yeah, he was incredible.
He's like, I understand like it's FCS, but like being an All-American at multiple positions, you're an athlete.
And like, he set the Montana State single season record for rushing yards when he was playing quarterback. And again, granted, it was like a wildcat offense, but it's just incredible.
Comical stuff. That's kind of like when you see stuff like that, that tells you like, okay, this guy was a different caliber of player than the guys he's playing against, right? And that's what you want to see out of a guy that's coming out of FCS. Like, is he truly a NFL talent? He clearly showed that he was from Mobile. Like, he had no trouble at all.
And he looked just as athletic, if not more, than guys who were a lot smaller than him, like your Brian Asamoah's, your Terrell Bernard's, your Jojo Domans. Like, he was just as fast, and he was a few inches and 20 pounds bigger.
Yeah, he had the size there.
If they can use him as kind of the run stuffing buck linebacker and allow Bush to be the space guy a little more, I mean, that would just be special. And that's kind of how I feel like Darian Beavers as well, linebacker Cincinnati, who's another big linebacker. A lot of people like him as a Belichick type. Beavers was up and down a little bit. He was much better in the team drills. The one-on-one with man coverage versus the backs was a little rough for him.
He's not going to excel in that though. He just isn't like.
So
that
again,
size.
if he's your new a little more athletic, a little bigger Vinny Williams, that's I'm
fine with that. Yeah, if he can play that role, because just don't make him man up guys a lot, and he'll be all right. I think he'll do fine.
And then the last linebacker I wanted to mention was Damon Clark out of LSU, and again, that's kind of just a Steelers archetype player. Big school. He's been there a while. He's played for a long time. Really smart player. Just he was playing a lot of Mike, calling out stuff. Can do a lot of things. Maybe not elite in anything, but he again a late round guy that maybe develops something later. And he can again probably would play that buck linebacker position and have Bush play the Jack. I'm not sure what it is.
Jack for them.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Okay, so the running backs were very interesting, and the guy I liked the best was Tyler Beatty out of Missouri.
Yep.
But he's not going to be a Steeler because he's 5'7". He's less than 200 pounds.
Not going to happen. We've been through Dre Archer once where it's never going to happen.
And Beatty's a lot better.
Oh yeah, he is. But like it's just that's just not who they want.
I think whoever takes Beatty is getting next Darren Sproles, to be quite honest.
That would be like I saw you make that like that's so. If he could be anything like that,
honestly,
awesome.
If whoever drafts him just also needs to draft Daniel Falele out of Minnesota and just throw swing passes where Beatty can hide behind Falele, because that happened a few times. It worked perfectly.
Yeah, they will not see him.
Yeah. But the running back then that I kind of came upon was Abram Smith out of Baylor, and he didn't have a great practice week. I thought he was okay, but in the game he was fantastic, which again doesn't matter as much, but he was like okay running the ball. You saw him pass a little bit, but I mean, he was doing everything in the game. He looked awesome, and he's a 5'11", 211 pounds. He played linebacker for a year for Baylor, so again, this would be a late round guy, but I think he has a little more juice than Snell. He has a little more versatility.
Yes,
and I think that he could, if you wanted to get that late round guy that is in somewhat a similar style to Najee, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, because for me, like a guy like him, he does bring a little bit more athleticism position than we have with Snell, because that's who we're trying to replace, right? Like ideally, and with him, he has the power to his game. Obviously, he plays like a linebacker would play at running back for sure. You can see that transitions to the offense when he's there. I mean, this is a guy with 1,600 yards last year.
Yeah,
like this isn't a guy that's like he's under the radar from the sense of like he's going to be a running back that's taken late, but he has the production in college. He has the mentality that we saw in the game. He had a really like that touchdown on the swing pass.
Yeah,
he looked real good up like running in space. Like I have no trouble with him at all as far as.
And I think like a guy that a lot of people liked was Damian Pierce out of Florida, who's I really liked as a runner.
Yes,
but he was a really good pass protector too, so he could be another one. But he had some issues catching the ball out of the backfield throughout most of practice, so I that's why I picked Smith over him. Another guy, we'll go with two tight ends that I liked. Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State, who the Steelers going back to back with a big school, Big Ten tight end.
Yep.
But Ruckert's a little bit more of your traditional inline blocker. Which I think would allow then Muth to flourish kind of as your more of a Travis Kelce type, where you can do a little more with him, and Ruckert can serve. And I mean, Ruckert's a very good tight end in his own right. I mean, the problem was just at Ohio State, there just weren't enough targets to go around.
When you have three first row receivers, and one that's on the way, it's a lot. He's not gonna stand out amongst that group, and it's not his fault for doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one was Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State. And the one things that I really liked about what the coaches did with the tight ends this week was that they put guys in roles that they didn't necessarily do a lot of in college. So in Kohler's instance, for Iowa State, they had a ton of really good tight ends, and because Kohler was such a good receiver, he was their Travis Kelce. They would put him in X, they'd motion him out, he played in the slot. I don't think I saw him in the slot once during practice, and he was like doing inline pass blocking, doing all that stuff, and I was like, and he was good at it. And I was like, okay, this is good.
He did well with it.
So again, like that's another guy that I think can do a little bit of everything in this tight end group. And I think adding him, adds, imagine like putting him and Muth as your outside wide receivers on the goal line.
Right. So he's a perfect like tight end number 2 type of guy. Right.
Exactly.
Like he fits their profile. He can play that role, I think, immediately. And then like as well as Gentry played this year compared to the past, like having him and another tight end that can actually play, that's really helps a lot with just different formations you can run and not have to worry about it.
Also, I have a soft spot for nerdy players, and Charlie Kohler won the William Campbell Award with the academic Heisman with a 3.99 GPA in mechanical engineering. He was a 4-time first team All Big 12 academic. So I like guys like that.
Him and Josh Dobbs can just talk to each other. They should they're gonna
build rockets.
Right, they should do a podcast if they
they would like take the wreckage of that bridge that
fell
Pittsburgh and build a rocket out of it. It's gonna be great.
Like we'll save you the trouble. We'll just take the debris.
No,
but that'd be awesome.
I didn't think of that. That's awesome. And then I'll finish with some safeties just because I think the Steelers kind of, if they let Edmonds go, they might be looking for a guy there.
Right.
I know they like Norwood, but I think they might be looking for a more. Maybe if you kind of I have two guys here. And the first one is Leon O'Neal out of Texas A&M, who is I'm a big fan of.
Yes.
He's more of your box safety, come down, hit against the run. I was saying he's a little aggressive with his angles. Sometimes he misses some tackles, but again, that's something you kind of want to be able to coach out of people, get them to see things better. But I think he's a really good athlete. I think he's solid in coverage, and I like him a lot. I like his mentality.
For sure.
And then Kirby Joseph is the safety out of Illinois, who had a big year this year. I think he led the FBS interceptions. If not, he was tied for the lead.
Yeah, he had a big year ball production wise.
Yeah, and he had an interception. He had interception practice at least once, where it was off a tip ball. But good. I mean, this was kind of the dream that they had for Gerard Holloman. But this guy's a lot more well-rounded of a player, and I think that would be a guy where you can say, all right, you're going to play free, and then we can. And I know Minka kind of was struggling this year with that, but then you can have the option of having the other guys be moved around a little more, which would be interesting.
Yeah, I think like a guy like him again with the ball skills, that's always nice to have, especially if you're going to take a safety later. Like,
and we saw Terrell Austin his first year with Minkah in 2019. That was Minkah's best year as an interceptor.
Yes.
So if you pair that with Kirby Joseph, who already has that skill set, that could be something special where you have that great guy patrolling the back end, allowing guys like Minkah and Terrell and even Trey Norman and then the linebackers to play a little better in the intermediate areas of the field.
Yeah, for sure. So.
All right, that's all the guys I got. Again, I'm not going to talk quarterbacks because again, they're
pretty much all in play. Like,
yeah.
And again, it just I think and what I wanted to say with it as far as this class goes, I think that there's a few of them that they would feel comfortable taking without moving up if they fell to them, and if none of them fall to them, then they're fine with it. That's kind of the thing. I think that's kind of where they're at. If none of the guys they truly want are willing to take a 20 get there, then that's fine. There'll be plenty of players that are well worth the 20th pick. If someone does fall to them, then I think there's a few guys that they might take. It just depends on them.
Yeah. I would be a little worried about them taking Pickett, but I don't think he'll make it to them.
No, I don't think so either. I think that a Carolina, Washington, someone in that range is going to end up with him for sure.
And I am very concerned about Carson Strong and his knee, but I think they will be as well.
Yeah, I don't think that he's a guy like as much as I like him as a player overall. Like you said, the knee thing, the relative lack of mobility compared to the rest of the guys in this class for the most part. I don't think he profiles for them, so I doubt he goes there. And then I know that you mentioned that Corral was told you were told that he's a guy to watch out for. I'm not very high on him personally.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think so
I would hope that he's not a guy in play at 20, but even he might be gone too, depending on what teams feel about him. So
yeah. We'll see. Absolutely. All right. Well, that'll do it for us for this week. We'll be back next week. Like I said, we'll probably start diving in a little more earnestly into the draft. We'll probably outline some of the needs a little more distinctly. We'll talk about kind of what the future is at those positions. Again, what archetype the Steelers are looking for in those positions. And we'll break down maybe some guys we want to talk about, and we might do that with regards to free agency as well. But then we'll probably break that on its own episode. But in the meantime, Shayne, let people know where they can find you and your work.
Find me at Shayne Kubis on Twitter, like always, and also follow at Steelers ATB, where we will try to get some stuff out there occasionally, especially when there's any sort of big news or almost free agency rolls around, especially when there's news about that going around or just signings that happen. And then also just follow anything around the block, and Mitch will tell you more about that anyway.
Yeah. So like we said, make sure you're following Around the Block on Twitter. That's where I posted all of our Senior Bowl winners and losers from each day of practice. Watch that stuff. Which is really cool to kind of see how players progressed over the course of the week. And then I just posted my the All Senior Bowl offense article on Around the Block, and by the time this comes out, ideally I'll have the defense article out. We'll see if I can get that done in time by the time this gets published. But in the meantime, thank you for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.